I knew something had shifted before Claire even finished the sentence. She said it across our kitchen counter, in the same calm voice she might have used to confirm a dentist appointment. "I don't think I want this marriage anymore." No shouting, no argument leading up to it, no tears waiting behind her eyes. Just Claire Halston, my wife of 13 years, telling me at 39 that she was finished with me. I was 41, tired of spending years repairing every broken thing in our house and every emotional mess Claire refused to name. I looked at her long enough to make sure she meant it. Then I nodded. All right. That was the reaction Claire never expected. She visibly relaxed at first, the way someone does when a bomb fails to detonate. She had expected bargaining. She had expected anger. Most importantly, she had expected me to prove how desperately I needed her. I did none of those things. I went upstairs immediately and packed only what I could carry. Several shirts, work pants, toiletries, my toolbox, the old travel guitar I had barely touched in years, one dark green duffel I had owned since before the marriage. I left most of the furniture, the electronics, the photographs, and every sentimental object behind. People always say that walking away proves you never cared. That is a lie told by people who have never been clearly told they were unwanted. I cared deeply. But once someone looks you in the eye and says they are done, begging for permission to stay is not love. It is theater. Claire remained downstairs. When I passed the kitchen on my way out, she still did not call after me. I caught her reflection in the glass of the back door. For 1 second, she looked less relieved than confused. She thought the argument was supposed to begin after her announcement. Instead, I simply left. Before I pulled out of the driveway, I sent my younger sister one short message. "I am safe. Claire and I are separating. I do not want the family calling Claire or taking sides." Even angry and humiliated, I refused to turn the breakup into family warfare. Then I switched off location sharing on my phone, removed Claire from shared calendar permissions, and changed the password on my primary email. I did not touch the joint checking account except to transfer the exact amount we had previously agreed was mine for monthly expenses. I photographed the balance first so Claire could never claim I emptied anything. Every step was deliberate. Not because I had planned for this night, but because 13 years with Claire had taught me that undocumented kindness eventually becomes someone else's ammunition. I drove for almost 3 hours with no firm destination. Shortly before midnight, I reached Mapleford, Pennsylvania. The town was far enough from my old life to feel anonymous, but close enough that I had not crossed half the country in a single desperate sprint. Downtown Mapleford was small, an old courthouse annex, a public library, a coffee shop, several brick storefronts lining a street that looked like it had stopped changing sometime around 1985. I noticed a print shop with a handwritten room for rent sign and knocked because the light was still on. Mr. Pritchard answered. Older, walked with a slight limp, direct without being intrusive. He looked at my duffel and said, "You look like a man who needs somewhere nobody asks questions." I replied, "That would be useful." He rented me the modest room above his shop, 1 bed, compact kitchenette, 2 narrow windows, a rear fire escape, an old lock that worked but barely inspired confidence. I paid the deposit and first month from my personal account and kept the receipt. Within days, I took temporary work shelving returned books at Mapleford Public Library. The job was intentionally modest. I was not starting an exciting new chapter. I was rebuilding basic rhythm. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. Derek, the evening security guard, noticed I knew how to repair loose hinges and rolling carts. I fixed minor things without being asked. It was the same habit Claire used to describe as my need to make order out of mess, except now nobody resented me for it. Next door to the print shop was Elena Ruiz's plant store. Elena was warm without being invasive. She did not immediately become anything other than a neighbor who said hello. One morning, she handed me a small fern from the clearance section. "It's tougher than it looks. Don't drown it," I told her. "That's about the level of responsibility I can manage." She laughed and left it at that. 4 weeks after I left, Claire sent a photograph. My old running shoes sitting beside the back door of our former house. The message read, "You forgot these." I did not answer. 3 days later, a text arrived from an unfamiliar number. "You still know how to turn a mess into something orderly." That sentence hit harder than anything Claire had said the night she ended our marriage. She used to say versions of it whenever I fixed a cabinet, repaired plumbing, reorganized bills, or calmed her after one of her emotional blow-ups. No stranger would know the phrase. I screenshotted it before deleting the notification. My sister contacted me shortly after. Claire had called her, sounding confused rather than devastated, asking whether I had mentioned another woman, whether I had said where I went, and whether I seemed upset enough. That last question bothered me more than the others. I told my sister not to argue with her. I asked her to save any future communication and forward it to me. I still refused to insult Claire. I simply said, "Don't feed whatever this is." Several days later, a divorce packet arrived through proper mail. Claire had initiated a mutual consent divorce and included a proposed property settlement. The terms were unusually clean. No demand for spousal support, division of accounts, disposition of the house. I signed the settlement and acknowledgement documents that could properly be signed at that stage, and mailed everything back without a note. The fact that I cooperated quickly would later matter. Claire could never claim I used the divorce to maintain contact. She could never claim I refused to let her go. Every intrusion that followed came entirely from her side. One evening after closing the library, my phone received a voicemail from a blocked number. No voice. Only a radio playing softly somewhere in the background. Then the small clatter of ceramic against a countertop. I recognized the combination instantly. Claire used to leave the kitchen radio on every evening while washing dishes. I saved the voicemail and did not call back. Instead, I began a dated incident log. I was not panicking. I was building a record. 2 nights later, I trimmed my beard before work. It was a minor change. I never posted a photograph. Elena saw me only briefly when I bought coffee. That night, while I was shelving books alone on the 2nd floor, my phone vibrated. Another unknown number. 1 sentence. "The shorter beard suits you." I stopped moving. I looked through the library's tall front windows toward the street. Across from the entrance, a gray sedan was parked beneath a dead street lamp. Same body style Claire drove. Before I could get downstairs, its headlights came on, and the sedan pulled away. When I returned to my apartment later, I emptied the green duffel onto the floor. My fingers caught on a thick spot beneath the inner seam. I cut the stitching open. A small tracking device dropped into my palm. The breakup had happened 4 weeks earlier. The tracker looked older than 4 weeks. Finding the tracker did not scare me as much as the timing did. Claire could not have hidden it after I arrived in Mapleford. She had no access to my apartment, no way to reach the duffel once I walked out of that kitchen, which meant there was a possibility I hated even more than being watched. She had prepared to track me before she ever told me to leave. I sat on the edge of my bed holding that small device and felt something shift behind my ribs. Not heartbreak. Something colder. The woman who told me our marriage was over had already sewn a leash into my bag before the conversation started. Instead of smashing it, I forced myself to slow down. I photographed its position inside the duffel, the torn stitching, the device itself, and every serial marking I could find. I placed it in a small container, and only after documenting everything did I disable it. Then I went through every digital door Claire might still have open. I changed all remaining account passwords. I enabled multi-factor authentication on everything that allowed it. I checked active login sessions across every platform I could think of. Nothing obvious explained how Claire knew about my beard or my evening shifts. That made the tracker the most likely answer, and the fact that it predated our separation made every anonymous message feel less like longing and more like inventory. Roughly 6 weeks after leaving the marriage, a package arrived at the library. No return address. My name was handwritten in letters I would have recognized blindfolded. Inside were concert tickets from our 7th anniversary, an old photo booth strip of Claire and me making ridiculous faces, and the pocket knife I had believed lost 4 years earlier. That knife mattered, because Claire had once accused me of being careless for losing it. Now I realized she had apparently kept it the entire time. There was no letter, no apology, just objects designed to force memory, each one selected to pull me backward into a version of us that no longer existed. I photographed the package and its contents before disposing of the sentimental items. I kept the shipping label and packaging in a growing evidence folder. Nostalgia is a beautiful thing until someone weaponizes it. Then Claire found Elena. An anonymous account followed the plant shop's public page and sent Elena a private message claiming I was still married, that I had abandoned my wife without explanation, and that women around me should be careful. Elena showed me rather than hiding it, which told me more about her character than a year of conversation could have. I told her the truth, in only the amount necessary. Claire ended the marriage. We were legally divorcing. She had begun contacting me anonymously. I did not ask Elena to take my side. I told her, "If this gets uncomfortable, I won't blame you for keeping distance." Elena answered, "That decision is mine, not hers." She said it without drama, the way someone states a fact they have no intention of debating. I respected her for it and kept my mouth shut about the rest. The gray sedan appeared twice more over the following weeks. Once near the library, idling at the curb for almost 20 minutes before pulling away. Once 1 block from the print shop on a Tuesday evening, when the street was nearly empty. I could never identify the plate clearly enough to be certain, and I refused to accuse Claire without proof. But I altered my routes home. I stopped parking in the same place. I shared my work schedule only with the library supervisor and Derek. Every adjustment felt like surrendering another small piece of the ordinary life I had come to Mapleford to build, and that quiet erosion angered me more than any single dramatic gesture could have. One January evening, I returned home and immediately knew something was wrong. My apartment door was not wide open. It was simply resting against the frame instead of fully latched, the way it might look if someone had pulled it closed behind them without pressing hard enough. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing was overturned. The precision was worse than vandalism. Someone wanted me to notice presence, not damage. On the kitchenette counter sat Claire's chipped blue mug from our old house. Beside it was our old kitchen timer, counting down from 13 minutes. 1 minute for every year of our marriage. I did not touch either item until I had photographed them from multiple angles. I recorded the timer running. When it reached 0, the alarm sounded in the silent room, like a small scream that had been waiting patiently for its turn. Beneath the table lay a freshly printed photograph. The image showed Elena and me outside her plant shop, laughing about something I could no longer remember. The camera angle proved it had been taken from across the street, by someone standing still long enough to frame the shot deliberately. I called the police. Officer Teresa Vaughn responded. She was professional but cautious, because there was no obvious forced entry, no stolen property, no visible injury, and I could not definitively prove Claire had entered. She took a report, photographed the items, and advised me to preserve every incident and call immediately if Claire returned. Her caution felt dismissive, but I understood it even while resenting it. She had a report with no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no broken lock. I could not expect her to treat it as an emergency just because my gut was screaming. Mr. Pritchard checked the apartment with me afterward. We discovered the rear window latch had a worn mechanism. From the fire escape, pressure at the right angle could lift it without breaking glass. I remembered leaving that window cracked earlier in the week after cooking. Pritchard replaced the latch and the apartment lock that same night. He also installed a basic camera covering the rear stairs without asking me to explain more than I wanted to. After that, I stopped being reactive. I purchased my own door camera. I backed up every file to 2 separate locations. I created a formal timeline connecting every incident with dates and evidence. I told my sister 3 things. Never give anyone my location. Never answer questions about Elena. Never confront Claire. I told Elena the same. I was no longer hiding because I was frightened. I was limiting the number of openings Claire could exploit, and there is a difference between those 2 things that most people never bother to learn. The next attack did not come at my door. It came at my livelihood. The library director received an anonymous email claiming I was unstable after my separation and had been using library computers to harass my wife. The accusation was false, but perfectly calculated. Claire was no longer merely watching me. She was trying to poison the one stable thing I had managed to grow. I responded calmly. I offered my work computer access logs and the incident report I had already filed with Officer Vaughn. The director believed me, but warned that another complaint might require a formal review. I walked out of that meeting understanding something clearly for the first time. Claire did not want me back. She wanted proof that she could still reach inside my life and rearrange the furniture whenever she felt like it. and unless I found a way to make her stop, she was never going to run out of rooms to enter. That night at 2:17 in the morning, my new rear camera sent a motion alert. I watched from bed as a hooded figure walked slowly up the fire escape. The person did not knock. They stopped at the repaired window, and one gloved hand tested the frame the way someone checks a door they have opened before. Then they noticed the camera. The figure stepped closer until the lens captured only the lower half of a face. For less than a second, I saw a familiar scar near the chin. Claire has had that scar since before I met her. She told me once she got it falling off a bike at age 11. I never forgot it because she laughed when she described the fall, and it was the first time I realized I loved her. Before the camera could capture more, a gloved hand covered the lens. The feed went black. Down on the street, an engine started and faded into nothing. I lay in the dark, staring at the frozen frame on my phone, at the jaw and the scar of the woman who had told me to leave, and then followed me across state lines to make sure I never actually could. By morning, I understood something important. Changing locks would never solve a problem that wanted control, not access. If Claire kept needing proof that she could still reach me, I was going to let her prove it in a way she could not later explain away. Derek was the first person I told everything. He had noticed me sleeping badly for weeks, and finally asked outright whether I was in trouble. I gave him the full picture. Tracker, anonymous messages, the package, the apartment intrusion, the camera footage with the scar. He listened without interrupting and then handed me a phone number. Mason Shaw, licensed investigator, methodical, quiet. He won't waste your time. We met at a diner outside downtown. Mason looked more like a high school teacher than a detective. Button-down shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He studied my incident log for almost 10 minutes before asking his only question. Do you want revenge, or do you want it to stop? I answered, I want her unable to do it again. He nodded. Good. That means we build facts, not theater. Mason was honest about what he could and could not do. He refused to claim he could magically trace anonymous social media accounts through IP addresses. Without cooperation from platforms or a court order, that kind of access did not exist. What he could do was preserve public activity, correlate timing, identify reused usernames or images, document physical surveillance, and connect observable behavior into a pattern that law enforcement and a judge would take seriously. His goal was not cinematic proof. His goal was cumulative weight. I reopened a dormant social media account and began uploading delayed, harmless details. One library shelf, my cracked guitar case, a coffee cup, a photograph of the fern, the sign of a downtown bakery posted hours after I had already left. Within 2 days, new accounts appeared. Comments echoed private phrases Claire had used during our marriage. Still repairing things that aren't yours to fix. You always did like quiet corners. One account briefly used a cropped photograph Claire had once posted publicly before changing its profile image. Mason captured it before it disappeared. Not definitive proof on its own, but another thread added to the rope. Then Claire targeted Elena directly. A second anonymous message arrived, this time including an old wedding photograph of Claire and me. The text read, "Ask him why he walked out on a woman who gave him 13 years. Elena handed me her phone without commentary. Instead of reacting emotionally, I asked her permission to let Mason preserve the message. She agreed. I apologized for her being dragged into something she had no part in creating. She told me, "You didn't send it." Our relationship stayed restrained. We did not rush into anything while danger was still circling. Elena was not a replacement for Claire. She was a person who deserved better than to become a chapter in someone else's war. Mason's surveillance confirmed the gray sedan near Mapleford, on multiple dates that matched anonymous messages, packages, and camera incidents. He never trespassed or hacked anything. He documented only what occurred in public spaces. On one occasion, he photographed Claire sitting in her sedan across from the library for nearly an hour, her face lit by the glow of a phone screen. On another, he watched her enter a print and ship store shortly before a package addressed to me was accepted there. The evidence was becoming cumulative, and cumulative was exactly what Mason had been building toward. Meanwhile, Claire continued cooperating with the divorce process as though nothing unusual was happening. That contradiction was the most unsettling part. Legally, she wanted the marriage ended. Emotionally, she wanted proof that I still revolved around her. She was not trying to reconcile. She wanted the power to leave me while remaining the center of my life. Mason put it plainly after reviewing everything. She isn't trying to get you back. She is trying to confirm that she can still move you. He recommended 3 things: an attorney-drafted cease and desist, preparation for a protection petition, and 1 controlled meeting, only if my counsel agreed and I felt safe, to remove Claire's future excuse that she misunderstood my wishes. We met at a cafe near the county courthouse. Mason sat several tables away. My attorney knew the time and location. Claire arrived roughly 20 minutes late. She had lost weight. Her eyes were shadowed. She stopped when she saw me and attempted a smile that did not reach past her mouth. "Hi, Evan," I answered. "Claire?" Nothing warmer. She started by claiming she only wanted to know I was safe. The anonymous messages were because I had shut her out. The photographs were harmless. She never intended to frighten me. I let her finish. Then I listed what had actually happened. Tracker sewn into my bag before I left. Packages with no return address. Apartment entered while I was at work. A photograph of Elena taken from across the street. A false complaint sent to my employer. A hooded figure testing my window at 2 in the morning. Claire did not apologize. Instead, she became angry that I had kept records. "You turned our marriage into evidence." I answered. "No. You turned my life into surveillance." The room went quiet between us. Then Claire finally said what I had suspected since the night I found the tracker. When she ended the marriage, she expected me to fight. She thought I would demand counseling, beg for another chance, refuse to move out, prove that losing her would destroy me. "I needed to know I mattered enough for you to fight," she said. I answered. "You told me to leave. I respected your decision," she snapped. "You respected it too easily." That sentence crystallized everything. Claire did not merely regret the breakup. My self-respect had insulted her. I did not comfort her. I did not shout. I told her she chose the divorce. She chose surveillance. She chose to involve Elena and my workplace. There would be no more private conversations after today. "You wanted to find out whether I could live without you," I said. "Now you know." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it? 13 years and I get nothing?" I answered. "You got 13 years. You don't get the rest of my life." My attorney's cease and desist was delivered. Claire received formal notice that I wanted no direct or indirect contact. My attorney filed for a protection order using the documented course of conduct. Claire looked at the paperwork and turned pale. "You hired people to watch me?" I answered. "I hired people because you wouldn't stop watching me." She asked if she could keep 2 things from our shared past. I told her property distribution could go through the divorce lawyers. She did not get a private channel back into my life. The petition moved forward. Claire was formally served with temporary restrictions pending the hearing. The morning after I learned she had been served, the library receptionist called me downstairs. A padded envelope was sitting on the counter. No return address. The postal acceptance stamp was dated after Claire received the temporary order. Inside was a USB drive wrapped carefully in tissue. No message, just the drive. For the first time, Claire had not merely crossed a boundary I stated. She may have crossed one a court stated. And whatever was on that drive was something she wanted me to see badly enough to risk everything to send it. Claire had spent months making sure I knew she could see me. The USB was the first time she accidentally gave me a chance to see exactly what she had been doing. I did not plug it into a library workstation. I called Mason first. He told me to photograph the envelope, handle the drive as little as possible, and bring it to him. He made a forensic copy on an isolated machine disconnected from my personal accounts and the library network. Because curiosity was eating me alive, I agreed to watch only that copy. The original stayed preserved for evidence. The drive held dozens of short, silent clips. Me entering the library, leaving work, carrying coffee, sitting near a second-floor window, unlocking the print shop entrance, walking beside Elena, loading books for the weekend surplus table, trimming the fern outside my apartment window. Some clips were taken from public sidewalks. Others were shot from angles that suggested hours of patient waiting. One was close enough that I could see my own expression while reading a text on my phone. Nothing was filmed inside my apartment. That distinction mattered. Claire still wanted room to claim she had never entered. The file dates spanned weeks, and several corresponded exactly with the timing of anonymous messages. She had been watching and writing at the same time, like someone narrating a documentary about a life she no longer had permission to touch. One video was worse than the rest. It showed me standing outside Elena's shop. The camera slowly panned from me to Elena and stayed on her for several seconds. Another clip followed Elena alone after I had already gone inside the library. My anger became something sharper than anything I had felt since the night I left. Claire was no longer targeting only me. I told Mason, "Whatever happens next, Elena stays out of the line of fire." I informed Elena and asked her to document anything unusual on her end. Mason delivered the preserved evidence to Officer Teresa Vaughn, along with everything else. The tracker photographs, the anonymous messages, the camera footage from my fire escape, shipping records, the blue mug and timer photographs, the false workplace complaint, his surveillance log, and the USB. Teresa's attitude changed visibly. She was not suddenly ashamed of her earlier caution. The evidentiary situation had genuinely shifted. She began treating the incidents as a documented pattern rather than a bitter divorce allegation, and I respected her more for needing proof than I would have respected someone who acted on my word alone. Investigators obtained legal authority to search Claire's residence and devices based on the accumulated evidence. They recovered her laptop, 3 cameras, removable storage, packaging supplies matching earlier mailings, several printed photographs of me, copies of anonymous messages in draft folders, and a handwritten notebook containing dates, addresses, and routines. The notebook was the most damaging item. Its first entries did not begin after I left. They began before the breakup. Weeks before Claire told me she no longer wanted the marriage, she had written observations about when I left for work, which friends I called, whether I slept in the guest room after arguments, and whether I had started packing anything. One entry referenced my green duffel by name. Another noted that a tracker had been placed inside it. The woman who sat across that kitchen counter and calmly ended our marriage had already prepared to follow me wherever I went. Investigators found notes showing that Claire's breakup was partly an emotional test. She had convinced herself that threatening the marriage would force me to panic, plead, and fight for us. Her plan was never to divorce immediately. She expected resistance. When I calmly walked out the door, she experienced my compliance as rejection, and that rejection became the engine for everything that followed. She tracked me, watched me, sent memories, targeted Elena, targeted my work. Her own handwriting proved the manipulation had begun before the first scene of this story. The notebook also contained a sketch of the rear fire escape with a note beside it. Window latch sticks if pushed upward. Investigators recovered a photograph of the back of Pritchard's building, taken before the mug ever appeared in my kitchen. Claire still denied entering the apartment, but her own notes described exactly how someone could. Device examination linked multiple burner accounts and message drafts to Claire's computer and phone. Draft folders contained comments she had posted on my social media, messages she had sent to Elena, and the false accusation emailed to the library director. One unsent draft was worse than all of them. Claire had begun writing a longer complaint, accusing me of threatening her. She intended to send it to my employer if I continued seeing Elena. The next escalation had already been planned. She was not reacting to pain. She was executing a schedule. Claire was questioned. She admitted watching me, sending some packages, and creating some accounts. She claimed she was checking whether I was okay. She said she was worried Elena was taking advantage of me. She insisted she never meant to cause fear. When confronted with the pre-breakup tracker note, she said, "I only wanted to know where he went if he left." That single sentence destroyed any remaining illusion that the tracking happened impulsively after heartbreak. She had built the cage before she opened the door. Mason called me late that evening. Police had found one final folder on Claire's laptop. Its title was simply my initials. Inside was a timeline beginning almost 2 months before she ended our marriage. The last planned entry was dated several weeks into the future. It listed the library, Elena's shop, my sister's city, and the weekend market. Claire had not been winding down. She had been expanding the circle. For the first time, I stopped thinking about merely escaping her. I decided I was going to stand in court, put every page into the record, and make sure she could never rewrite what she did as love. For months, Claire had depended on one thing. Every invasion happened privately enough for her to call it concern. Court was the first room where she could not control both the action and the explanation. The divorce reached its final stage after the required waiting period and filings. The property settlement went through exactly as written. I did not contest the division to punish Claire financially. I took exactly what the agreement gave me, and nothing more. My revenge was never going to come from stealing money or manipulating assets. It was going to come from standing still and letting the record speak. At the protection hearing, Claire appeared with counsel. She looked composed in a way that felt rehearsed, like someone who had practiced calm in a mirror that morning. Her strategy was to minimize everything. The tracker was for safety. The messages were emotional. The photographs came from public places. The blue mug could not be proven to have been placed by her. The USB was meant to show me she still cared. She implied that my silence had made her desperate, and that I had weaponized her emotional breakdown. I did not attack Claire's character. I gave the court sequence and evidence. She ended the marriage. I left. I cooperated with the divorce. I repeatedly refused contact. I never threatened her. I did not pursue her. I changed my routines to avoid her. She kept escalating anyway. I described how the behavior affected me. Changed locks, altered routes, sleeplessness, fear for Elena, fear that my workplace would believe a fabricated accusation. The strength came from restraint. Claire could not provoke me into sounding unstable because I refused to perform for the room. I simply told the truth in order and let the dates do the work. The notebook destroyed the heartbroken impulse defense. The tracker was planted before the breakup. Claire's own notes demonstrated that she expected me to fight for the marriage. The gray sedan surveillance was scheduled. The anonymous accounts were drafted on her devices. The workplace complaint came from her keyboard. Her notes about the rear window matched the intrusion route. The USB was sent after clear legal boundaries had been imposed. Every excuse she offered became thinner when placed beside her own planning. Under pressure, Claire stopped pretending she only wanted me safe. She said, "He made me feel disposable." My attorney asked how. Claire answered, "He left when I told him to." The room went quiet. That admission revealed the entitlement at the center of everything. Claire believed she had the right to reject me, and also the right to dictate how devastated I was allowed to be. A final protection order was entered with clear no contact and anti-stalking restrictions. The USB sent after service became a separate serious issue. The criminal case proceeded independently. Claire eventually accepted responsibility in a negotiated criminal resolution involving stalking-related conduct and violation of the protective boundary. The court imposed a county custody term, supervised probation afterward, strict no-contact conditions, mandatory behavioral health treatment, restrictions against using third parties to reach me, and reimbursement of documented security-related losses. The punishment was not framed as Claire being destroyed forever. It was framed as the first time in her life she could not talk her way around a boundary someone else had set. Before sentencing, I gave a short victim impact statement. I did not say I hated Claire. I did not ask for maximum suffering. I said, I spent 13 years trying to make our life work. When she said it was over, I respected her answer. Everything after that happened because she refused to respect mine. I added, I don't need Claire ruined. I need Claire unable to make my life her property. Claire cried. This time, I did not move toward her. I did not feel satisfaction because she was crying. The satisfaction came from the fact that her tears no longer changed the outcome. She could not cancel the hearing. She could not erase the notebook. She could not unsend the USB, or turn the tracker into romance, or frighten Elena away, or threaten my job, or make me come home. Her real punishment was losing the control she had been trying to preserve since the night she tested whether I loved her enough to beg. Officer Teresa Vaughn spoke with me afterward. She acknowledged that the early incidents had looked thin in isolation, but together formed a very different picture. I did not demand an apology. I simply said, "That's why I kept everything." She nodded, and that was enough. My sister asked whether I was okay. I told her, "I think I'm finally going to be." I made clear that nobody in my family was to harass Claire or celebrate publicly. This was not a victory parade. It was the end of a siege. Elena did not ask for details of sentencing. She asked whether I wanted coffee. That ordinary question, offered without weight or expectation, was exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time in months, weeks passed without anonymous messages, packages, gray sedans, or camera alerts. Then months passed. I began to trust quiet again. Much later, after Claire had completed the court-imposed no-contact period without further violations, I was closing the weekend book and plant booth Elena and I now ran at Mapleford's town square. I turned around. There was an envelope on the counter. No one nearby saw who placed it there. My name was written on the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. Claire's. There had been a time when seeing Claire's handwriting could tighten every muscle in my body. By the time the final envelope appeared, what surprised me most was that my hands stayed steady. More than 20 months had passed since the case reached its resolution. Claire had complied with the imposed no-contact period. The court restrictions had run their course without another proven violation. I chose not to spend those months checking on her. Mason handled the occasional verification needed for my safety. I did not follow Claire's social media. I did not ask mutual acquaintances about her. I refused to let surveillance turn me into a mirror image of the person who had surveilled me. Mapleford had become home, in the way places do, when you stop treating them as hiding spots, and start treating them as ground you chose. I was still working at the library, handling more maintenance and circulation responsibilities, because I had proven reliable. The old travel guitar was no longer collecting dust. I played it on the fire escape some evenings, while the sun dropped behind the rooftops, and Pritchard closed the print shop below. Derek still worked nights. Mr. Pritchard still limped between his machines. The fern Elena gave me was alive. It had been repotted twice, which said more about my recovery than any speech I could have written. Elena and I had grown closer slowly. There was no dramatic declaration after the danger ended. We began by having coffee, walking home together, helping each other with the weekend booth that combined used books from library surplus sales and small potted plants from her shop. The relationship felt safe, because neither of us tried to own the other. Elena could leave for the evening without explaining where she was going. I could sit in silence without someone treating it as punishment. Those ordinary freedoms were the exact opposite of everything Claire had tried to preserve, and I never once took them for granted. I opened the envelope that evening, alone in my apartment. Inside was a small sprig of rosemary. There was one short note. This is the last thing I managed to keep alive. Goodbye, C. No demand, no accusation, no question, no photograph proving she had watched me, no instructions about what I should feel. For once, the message did not attempt to control my response. I sat with it for a long time. I did not romanticize it. I did not call Claire. I did not search for her. I also did not throw the rosemary into a dumpster in anger. That night, I walked to the river outside Mapleford and planted the sprig near the bank. The gesture was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness in some grand, sentimental sense. It was simply the first object Claire had sent that I did not feel compelled either to keep or destroy. I could place it somewhere and walk away, and that freedom was worth more than any apology she could have written. Teresa later confirmed through the proper channels that Claire had completed her required treatment, satisfied the conditions of her case, and relocated out of state. Mason sent me a final brief message. Nothing new. I answered, good. I no longer needed weekly reports. The file could close. I think back sometimes to that first night in our kitchen. Claire believed she was testing whether I could survive losing her. I believed I was simply accepting the end of a marriage. Neither of us understood what her test would become. For months, she tried to turn my silence into guilt, fear, nostalgia, and control. She tracked me across state lines, entered my home, targeted the people around me, and tried to dismantle the quiet life I built with my own hands. In the end, the most complete revenge I ever got was refusing to become the person she needed me to be. I did not chase her. I did not break. I did not destroy her. I simply stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own choices. One ordinary morning, I unlock the library. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other. I hear a car slow outside. Months earlier, I would have frozen. This time I barely look. It keeps driving. I open the blinds and sunlight moves across the shelves. My phone is quiet in my pocket. My shoulders are loose. Elena's shop is opening across the street. Somewhere above the print shop, the fern is still growing. I finally understand that peace does not arrive with applause. It arrives when the person who once controlled every reaction in your body becomes just another name from a life you no longer live. I am not running. I am not watching. I am not waiting. I am simply here, steady, free.